Okay, Jackie, thanks very much. Now I know you're not. You'll be like my family. My family were blow-ins into Waterford. Uh, so could you just go back and maybe tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Waterford, because it's kind of an interesting story.
I worked in Dublin with a publican, Bill Martin, for a good few years, and Bill had sold a pub in Dublin, and I went out to live in Ballymun, which was only not long built at the time, and I got a job then with a publican in Parnell Street in Dublin, who was a Tipperary man. But Bill Martin came out to me one day and he said, look, he said, I'm interested in buying a pub in Waterford. Would you be interested in coming down, he said, and working with me? Because we have worked together for years. So I was him and hawing, blah, blah. I had wife, 2 young children, what have you, and him and hawing. So we came down anyway to Waterford, myself, Bill Martin, and his brother Tony. And the pub he was interested in was the Hibernian Bar, who had been, was owned by Maureen Fann. And we went in there, blah, blah. I was only a young fella at the time, and they were doing the business, what have you. And we went that night out around to have a look what was the opposition like. And there was a fella in the Royal Bar, a fella called Joe Garvey. And Joe was a great publican now, a great character. He had come back from London. He had worked for Mooney's in the Strand in London. And myself, Bill, and his brother Tony, we were sitting at the counter anyway, having a drink. And Joe Garvey was behind the counter. And Joe was a character now, you know. As a publican's go, he was a character. And he kept looking at Bill Martin. And he said to him, I know you, he said. And Bill Martin said, no, you don't know me. He said, why do? He said, I know you. He said. And he said, tell me, young man, he said, did you ever work, he said, in London? And Bill said, I did, he said, yeah. Did you ever work in Mooney's in the Strand, he said. And Bill said, I did. That's right, says Garvey. You were the cellar boy, he said, when I was the manager. Now there's a coincidence that a guy comes down from Dublin and ends up in a pub. So...
But your man must have some memory then.
Huh?
He had some memory.
Oh, Garvey.
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous memory. Oh, yeah, yeah. So Bill ended up, he bought a Hibernian Bar anyway. So I was there with him for a few years anyway, and we had good connections anyway, myself and Bill, and through family and what have you. But when I moved out to Johns Park, I was working with Bill, and I came in here one night into the pub here, myself and the wife, and John Brady and Mary were here at the time, and got chatting and talking. I knew we had common interest. And he said to me, you're working for Bill Martin, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, and you're only living up the road, he said, yeah. But he said, you're working in town. Yeah. Sure, why wouldn't you come and work for me? He said, sure, it's only up the road, he said. Sure, I might think about that, I said. So I ended up working for John Brady.
So you were headhunted?
Well, I wouldn't say so much headhunted, but you were there and you were available, and that was it. So I ended up working here with John and Mary, and Shamey Code, of the famous Code family. Shamey was a barman here at the time. Another man from Johns Park, Lord of Mercy, Shamey Doughton, he worked here at the time. Jimmy Nolan, which everyone knows, Jimmy. Jimmy was a barman here with me. Michael Sinnott. A lot of young lads that lived in the area were around and worked, because John Brady always gave a fair play to anyone that wanted to do a bit of work, you know. So I was here with John for a couple of years, and but still lived in the park. I moved on from John then. I went out and worked for the Waterford Social Centre, and I was there with them for bones of 16 years. Moved on from that, went to work back in the old area where I started off. I worked for Johnny O'Mara down the King's Bar in Lombard Street. I was with Johnny for nearly 4 years. Left him, went to work in the Holy Cross for Bobby Boyle. I was with him for bones of 10 years nearly, and Bobby then bought a pub in Slieve Rue, and he asked me would I go over there for a month or two to get the place right and sorted out, and I ended up being there for 4.5 years, which seems to be a trait of barmen. Like, you go into one place, you think, yeah, I got out here in a couple of while, but you don't. And then I packed it up, and I didn't work behind the counter since.
So just to go right back to when you first came to Waterford, what was your impressions of Waterford? Because you were come from Dublin, or you were a Kildare man coming from Dublin. What did you think of Waterford City when you came down first?
Well, I remember when we drove in through Sally Park, and there was a big sign that said Downs is number 9. And I looked at this and I said, what the hell is Downs' number 9? Never heard of it, didn't know what it was, until we got to the pub. And then you saw Downs' number 9, the whiskey. That's what it was. First impressions of Waterford, it didn't look great. And it was hard to know at the time, would you be settled or would you not settle? Because then again, you never know that until you actually settle anyway. But first impressions, good ones. And I'll always remember my father-in-law, who was born and reared in Dublin, in the Liberties. When he came down here first, he couldn't understand one thing. And I said, what is that? How come, he said, that when you walk down the street, everyone says hello to you? You can be in Dublin, he said, for 50 years, he said, and nobody will ever say hello to you. Something different, you know. And that's my impression of Waterford, that the Waterford people, no matter where you meet them, will always say how you, well, how you going, blah, blah, you know.
So we're kind of a friendly lot.
Well, I would say so.
Okay. And then when you were working out here, I mean, out in St. John's Park, do you remember many of the characters used to come into the pub?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I heard John Brady the other day talking about people, and obviously I was here at the time when he was talking about all the characters and the whole lot. And my thing is that pubs don't make characters, characters make pubs. And I can remember all the people he was talking about. The Jerry Fagans, Tommy Kennedys, all them. Like, Jerry Fagan came from Dublin. Paddy Kavanagh, he came from Dublin as well. Paddy Welch lived in Norman Square. he came from Dublin as well. They all came down with the paper mills. And they were all characters, you know, in their own right. They all loved what they were doing. But they loved Waterford. Because none of them ever went back. You know, like when you think about, like, Jerry Fagan lived down on the German Road there. And he was here for years and years and years. He would not go back to Dublin. Paddy Kavanagh lived up the top of the park. Wouldn't go back to Dublin.
And did they start working in the paper mills in Dublin?
Yeah.
And then the company transferred to Waterford, isn't it?
They were in Clondalkin.
Okay.
And they came from Clondalkin down here when the paper mill started here in Waterford. That's my knowledge now.
Yeah.
And listen to them talking. But they were all great characters in their own right. And they all had their different ways and different means of what have you. And when they get a few points in them, blah, blah, it could be different. But they were characters. Old Bobby Sinnott, born and bred in Waterford. And he stuck in the middle of 3 Dublin men. You know, that was the way it was. Which was great. Because the banter that went on and the whole lot, it was always marvellous, like, you know.
Would they always keep saying they were Dubs? Like, would they still be kind of...
No.
Okay. So
No.
at some point they became Waterford.
Well, they'd never give up their identity. But the thing was, they were living here. And that's where you lived, you know. I mean, people often say to me, if I'm in Dublin or if I'm even on holidays anywhere, people say, where are you from? I say, Waterford. What am I supposed to say? You know? Because I've spent more of my life in Waterford than I did anywhere else, you know. So I never give up that identity, you know. Like I have 2 kids born in Dublin, 2 eldest daughters who were born in Dublin, and I have 4 that were born in Waterford. And I have 3 of them living in the area here, 1 not living too far away across the way, and I have 1 daughter living in Tramore, and a son living out over in the Cork Road direction. So like...
They're all around.
They're still here, and they won't leave. You know, most people say like, sure, look, when you have 6 kids, some of them they'll emigrate or they'll go. No, they won't.
And as a barman, like back in those days, I mean, it was very different, wasn't it? Because one of the big differences was that there was a book. You know what I mean? That people could get drink on credit and pay off the following week kind of thing or whatever. Do you remember that period?
I heard you asking that question to John Brady the other day. Well, I can put it to you this way, is there's certain people that you could do that to, and there's certain people you couldn't do that to.
And that was your own judgment call?
Well, you have to make that call. Like,
but would you blame then John Brady? Would you say, I can't because John says, you know, is that how it worked or how does it work?
Well, you know, the way it was, John Brady would always say to you, like, you make that decision. But if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, you're right. That's it. You know, like, if he's down a tenner at the end of the week, that's your fault, not his.
You learned your lesson very fast, I'd say.
Well, you have to learn, you know, because I always believe, like, I spent 37 years behind bar counters. And I always learned one thing. At 10:30 in the morning, when you open them doors, you'll learn something new every day. You know, and that's a fact, because you don't know who's going to walk through that door. Good, bad or indifferent, whoever they are. You'll learn something new anyway. But, you know, like, when you worked in here, like in Brady's, in the old pub here, with all the characters that we had around us and all the people that lived here. This was a marvellous community, a fabulous community, because everybody helped everybody else. When I moved out here, nobody knew me. They hadn't a clue who I was. But everybody knows me now. Even the young kids, when they're only grown up, they all know me now. And it's a marvellous experience to stand behind the counter, because that's where life is learnt. Because you'll meet everything, or whatever you want to meet.
And like, do you know the way, way back, you know, we say when you first came down this area, I mean, there would be people, I suppose, say the old lads, there would be people that would be coming back and forth to England, there'd be people that would be, I suppose even people that were in the British Army and stuff like that way back. Would you remember any of those old characters?
No.
Okay.
No. Like, I know a lot of lads that went over to England, all right, and came back, what have you. But like, that was a different sort of thing. Lads went to work. They went over to London and they worked in London for years and they came back. But anyone from Johns Park that ever went to London to work, they always came back to Johns Park. I mean, we had our gathering there last year, and the amount of what we might call the old stock that lived in Johns Park, grew up in Johns Park, that turned up. I mean, people came from England just to be back here in Johns Park for that. People you hadn't seen in 20 years, and people that lived in Waterford, that lived in different areas, that mightn't been out here for 10 years, came back to Johns Park. That's the difference. Community. And you'll find that if you look around Johns Park, the amount of houses, if anyone puts a house up for sale, 9 times out of 10, it'll be somebody that was reared in Johns Park will try and buy that house to get back to Johns Park. That's it.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
That people still have that connection.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, yeah. Yeah. But they always want a connection. And the gathering proved that. That the square was full. When they had the field day up there with the music and the whole lot, it was full of people. An awful lot of people that came from different areas, came across the sea, back to Johns Park. That's what it's about.
And would you remember going back to when you were working out here first? I mean, big sports days and different things that were going on, big occasions.
Well, I suppose,
like John River and the hurling and all that kind of stuff.
well, I suppose the biggest things at that time was Johnville Football Club, who had won Munster Cups and won the leagues here in Waterford, and won cups in Waterford and the whole lot, and big rivalry with Bows down the road, what have you. They were big days. Johnville went to a FII Junior Cup up in Galway. Huge following in Johns Park that went up there. Now, they didn't win it, but that following was always there. Kilcorn Park, across the road, huge thing. I mean, Waterford playing over there. And, I mean, the old days of the Shamrock Rovers and the Shelburnes and all them, I mean, you could have thousands of people over there. And the two pubs here and the candy store down below, I mean, people would tell you about a big game in Kilcorn Park, Waterford Rovers, big game. There'd be people walking from the top of the town all the way out, stop in the candy or stop here and have their sandwiches and a couple of pints and then go to the match. And then on the way back they might stop in again before they head back up to the top of the town. You know, like, they were all the old things like that went on. Kilcorn Park was always and will be remembered as the home of Waterford soccer. Because I always remember being at games in Dublin when Waterford were playing, and you'd meet Dublin fellas and they'd say to you, "Jeez, I remember being down in Kilcorn Park." And that was the place that was always remembered, was Kilcorn Park, you know. And of course all the great people that played over there, like, you know.
Or would you go over every second Sunday kind of thing to see matches now?
When Waterford were playing over there, I used to be over there, yeah, definitely. We had our old tin over there, like, so I think John Brady explained that to you. We had our tin over there, like, and that was our way of getting in there, like, you know. But yeah, there was some great days over there, marvellous days. Unfortunately, it's not here now, but hopefully it might be again.
Yeah. Well, it was a great soccer town, wasn't it, Waterford?
Well, sure, it was built on soccer. Well, I could be wrong in saying that, but like in the early 50s and probably into the 60s, hurling was obviously Waterford. But then when the 60s came along and the great Waterford teams that played in the 60s, when they were winning leagues and winning cups and the whole lot, the hurling side would probably dropped away a bit. And now it's the other way around. Yeah. We have great expectations.
Well, we love sport, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, Waterford's always been known as a great sporting county, you know.
So yeah, just to go back to them, you were saying about the book and all that, right? Would you, how did that work? Just tell me how it worked.
Honesty. Simple as that.
So basically, people would know how much drink they owed, or how much they owed when they come in on payday and pay off, and start afresh.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it was, like, if you knew a person and they were genuine, you'd have no problem giving them a couple of bottles of stout. And they'd arrive in on the Friday evening and they might have £10 note, but a lot of money at the time. And they'd leave the £10 note on the counter and they got a bottle of stout and they'd just look at you and say, "You know what to do with that." So you took for the other three that they got. That was it. There was no big deal like about it, like, but that's the way it worked. The system worked that time, you know. And I always remember a great story about an old character of mine. In his latter years, he did drink here, but in his earlier years, he used to drink down where I worked in Bill Martin's. And it was the time when Graveses were taken over. And he said to me one evening, he said, "I have an awful problem," he said. I said, "What is that?" Well, he said, "I used to get a loan of a £5, he said, every Monday. And he said, I'd pay it back on the Friday when I got paid. But he said, this new crowd are after taking over," he said. "So I don't know how I'm fixed," he said. Now a fiver would have got him 4 bottles of stout at a time. So I said, you're going to ask him anyway. Oh, he came along to me anyway the following week and he says, I sorted that out, he said. Well, I said, how are you fixed? I went into this fella, he said, a young man, he said, collar and tie on him, he said, the whole lot, he said, whole lot, he said. And he said, my name is, and I had a thing, he said, about, I used to get a loan of a fiver on Monday evening, he said, to get a few bottles of stout. And I'd always pay back on the Friday. And he said, this young fella turned around and he looked at me, he said, so you're that man, he said, are you? What man is that? Well, he said, have a look at this file here. He said, I have a file here, he said, that height, he says. Now, he said, I have no problem about giving you the fiver. No whatsoever, he said. But what I want to know is this, he said. Do we owe you the fiver or do you owe us the fiver? Because that's the height of that, he said. And that was the character as I knew the characters, you know. But like, that's the way things went at different times. When you ask me about the book, that's the way, like, people in jobs could get a loan of a tenner or a fiver or something like that and pay it off at the weekend when they got paid and the whole lot. The book was never what you might call a huge thing. It was a trusting thing. That if you trusted someone, that was it. But then again, you were the one that could turn around and say, sorry, you didn't come back to me. End of story. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it only worked if someone paid back the money.
Well, obviously. You know, it doesn't work any other way.
And I mean, it wasn't just in pubs, it was in shops and everywhere, wasn't it?
Well, I presume so, yeah. You know, like, I presume like the small shops and things like that, they had their own customers, blah, blah, and they looked after their people and hopefully they would come back and look after them. Yeah.
And then the drink behind the bar in Waterford, at that time, you know, there was lots of different types of Guinness and stuff like that, the bottles.
When I came to Waterford, the largest sale of drink was large stouts. Everybody had large stouts. Draft Guinness was there, but it wasn't really used. Yeah, you had about 4 or 5 different large bottles. Keneally's, Powers of Dungarvan, Kiley's, Sullivan's. But there was another one, can't even think of it.
Galway's.
No, they didn't do large, well, not to my knowledge anyway. But yeah, you would have certain people that would come into the pub to you who would only drink 1 bottle of stout by name. You had to be Sullivan's or Kiley's or Powers of Dungarvan or something like that. And so obviously you had to stock all that. And
so you nearly stock some for particular customers?
You had to stock it all anyway. I mean, I remember John Brady here in the store, he'd have the bones of maybe 80, 90 dozen of stout in crates, but to be all different. You know, there could be 20 of one and 30 of another and what have you. And Draft Guinness, it was there, but it wasn't a Waterford drink. A large stout was a Waterford drink. And it took a while for people to come around to the idea of pints of Guinness, like, and all that. Even down in Bill Martin's in the Hibernian Bar, it was the same way. I mean, most pubs in Waterford was large stouts. And if you went to most pubs in Waterford now, you'll see people drinking pints.
It's gone the other way, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the whiskey, I mean, people would have a half one would it be Scotch or Irish? What would they drink? Or, do you remember?
Predominantly Irish.
Okay.
Yeah. Powers Paddy.
Okay.
You know, Scotch. No, wasn't.
And would it be kind of closing time? People have a half one, or when do you have a half one?
Well, you see, different people have different ways of drinking. The old stock would always tell you that you never drank whiskey on top of stout because it settles on top. They would have, the old stock would have a half one and a small stout, and they drink the half one first and then the small stout, and then what was left in the glass of the half one would be poured in top of the small stout because it floated. Spirits float on top of Guinness, and they would never drink that way. Most what you would call of the older stock always drank a half one first and then a bottle of stout.
A small bottle.
Or in Waterford, a large stout.
Okay. And would that be in the middle of the day now? Would that be kind of like tea time or whatever?
Yeah, sure, could be any time.
Okay.
You know, it depends.
Yeah. And then people would, I suppose, they would swear by medicinal qualities of drink like this.
That's an age-old thing. You know, it's not something that came in the last 5 years, like, you know. People talk about the hair of the dog and all that crack, like, and what have you, but you know, individuals, different people do different things, and that's it. You know.
And I mean, there wasn't much. I mean, okay, I mean, you had Harp and Smithies. That was. There wasn't much other variation, and cider came in obviously. There wasn't much variation.
Yeah, but back in the late '60s, like, you only got Guinness, you got Harp, and that was about it. Lager and a stout, and that was it. And then later on, then of course, other things came along, Carlsberg and what have you. But they were a bit later on. You wouldn't get like in Dublin, you wouldn't get a large bottle of stout. Back in my time, you wouldn't get never heard of a large stout. But if you went into a pub in Dublin and you're from Waterford and you asked for a large stout, they'd know straight away you're from Waterford, you know. But then that's all gone now. I think Waterford and Galway were two places where you could get large stouts. But then when they changed all the systems with bottles of lager and all that, they brought in large harps and large ales and all that. Smithies was a big ale, was huge around the country at the time. Then you had Bass, which was very, very popular back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Was it more so popular in Waterford or was it popular in Dublin as well?
Popular in Dublin.
Okay.
Population-wise,
Yeah.
you know, because then you had McArdle's ale, which was brewed in Dundalk, which was all bottled. You couldn't get a pint of McArdle's. Phoenix, Smithies. Smithies was always identified with Kilkenny. And then in later years they changed over the system where all bottles were long bottles. And that was for production reasons, for building a plant where every bottle could be the same size, the whole lot, so they could bottle everything at the one time.
Change the labels.
That's it, you know.
And the other way people sometimes say that even though Waterford is a tiny place in comparison to Dublin, but that there is actually quite a lot of similarities between the two places, because I suppose because Waterford had a port and because it was a British garrison town and all that kind of stuff. Did you ever feel as if Waterford people were kind of similar to Dublin people?
Very much so. And I would never look at Waterford as a small area. I mean, Waterford is a city, and it has its own orbis intacta. And anyone that I know, and I have relations in Dublin, blah blah, and what have you, would always say they were going to Waterford City. They'd never go say they were going to Waterford Town. And that's a misconception on people's part, that Waterford is only a town. It's not a town, it's a city. It's a bloody big city. When you look around you, I mean, it's loads of areas all over this city that this country hasn't been made aware of. You know, I was only looking at something the other night there, nationwide, where they had a thing on the prom in Tremor, prom festival. And I mean, Tremor looked fantastic. It looked great. So, like, why would you want to say it's a town? I mean, it's a city with hinterland. That's it.
But the personalities of the people, would you think what? Did you, as a Dublin person or Kildare person, lived in Dublin? When you came down, did you think it was kind of similar to the people you know in Dublin?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
I suppose it's a working class city, and it was very,
Well,
factories.
you see, they had a lot in common with docks, factories, what have you, and like you can't say in Dublin that everyone knew everyone, but like if you come to John's Park and you live here as long as I have, I probably would know 85% of the people that live here. And they would know me, and they'd probably know my wife, and they'd know me kids and the whole lot. That's a huge difference. I mean, if you put the population of Waterford into Dublin in an area, that's the same way. They all know one another to a certain extent. They mightn't be the best of mates or anything like that, but they know a fella living down the road or up the road or what have you. That's it. You know, I mean, I've always found, as long as I'm here, and my wife, which is born and bred in the Liberties, has always said the same thing. You can't go past them. You know, I mean, my kids were all reared here. They all love it. They will not leave it. You know, you hear of people saying, God, it's terrible immigration and kids have to go. Which they do, if they want to better themselves or do something for themselves. But I'm lucky to that extent that none of mine never took a plane anywhere. You know, they're still here. That's it. You know.
That's great. And I'm just trying to think, of any other characters that you remember from way back that maybe John didn't mention the other day. Do you remember any of the old stock that?
You're trying to get me in trouble now.
Exactly.
No. No, anyone that John Brady mentioned, I would have known. And they're all the same characters. I mean, I remember Catherine's father, Tom McGrath, Lord have mercy on him, Frankie Frampton, all good, genuine people that came into the pub to you, had their few jars and walked out. 9 times out of 10, they walk out the same way as they walked in. Whether they had 1 bottle or 5 bottles, that's the way it was. You never had a bit of bother, never had a bit of problems. And I did hear you mention the other day about that John's Park had what you might call a small bit of a reputation.
Yeah.
I never found that. As a guy coming in,
Yeah.
I never
as a
found
blow-in, you never got that.
no, no. Always made for more than welcome. My family, always more than welcome. There used to be a story told years and years ago about if a chap from town was going out with a girl from John's Park, the furthest he could ever walk was to church. I never knew of anything like that. You know, I mean, there's a lot of lads from town marry girls from John's Park. You know, I mean, a lot of that is sort of old Peugeot type of thing, like, you know. You don't, you know. I mean, I remember asking Jimmy Nolan one day, I met him just out on the road there, and I said to him, "Come here, Jimmy," I said, "I want a word with you." And he said, "What's that?" He said, "Jack." I said, "When are you going to write the book?" He said, "What book?" "The book on this place here," I said. "Brady's Pub," I said. "After all now, Jimmy," he said, "we all worked together," I said, blah, blah, when we were kids and young and what have you. "I don't think I'll ever get around to it, Jack," he said, "because there's too much to tell." You know, but that was the way it is, was like, and I mean, you had great characters here in John's Park. And you'll always have characters. And they were always good people, decent people. And I will go back to what I said at the start. It's a marvellous community. Believe me, if that ever happens to anyone or anything like that, people in a bit of bother or anything like that, there's no better people than the people in John's Park to rally. And they've done it, and they'll do it again.
Jackie, that's great. Thanks very much for
Not at
all
all.
that. That's brilliant.
Not at all.
Probably to get a kind of a different perspective, someone coming in.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know, like, it is easy in one way, but when you stand at the other side of a counter and you're looking out at the people that are around you, then you know what you have or what you haven't. And out here, you have it. And I always say that.
And would you ever had to throw people out of the pub?
Sure, look it. It's part and parcel of the game. It like, there's never...
See, there wasn't much choice. You had Brady's and the candy store, and that was it out here. You'd have to go into town after that, really.
No, you had Garvey's down the road, like, you know.
Stores, yeah.
But, like, all that sort of thing, like, that you sort of had, well, you know, Brady's, or you had the candy store or whatever. They were all in there and they're all killing one another and all that. That's a load of rubbish.
No, I never heard that.
No. It's like...
I heard it about the whale up in Yellow Road now, but that was about...
Yeah, well, that's a different ball game now. But, like...
Hopefully we'll be heading there next year to do another story. Up around the top of the town.
Yeah, well, yeah. But, like, all these things, like everything else, something to get legs, and to get legs, and to get legs, and to get legs. If you're seen putting a fellow outside the door because he has too many pints in him, and there's a taxi sitting there waiting, and you put him into the taxi and the whole lot, somebody will come down and say, "I saw your man being fired out through that door there the other night." You can't win. You know, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You know. So, no, in this pub, or the one down the road, I've never, in all the years that I've been here, there's never been anyone or anywhere seriously damaged or hurt or anything like that. And in the community in John's Park, there's never been anyone damaged or hurt. And that's a fact, you know. He used to call it the naked city one time. Because they were afraid to come out here. For what? People are people. You could say that about any estate in Waterford. You know, I mean, just 60 odd years here now. I think it was, yeah, it was built before Lisduggan. It was built before Lashville. Certainly built before Ballyveig. And like, any area that you're in, it's always going to have problems. I mean, if you put, there's what, 451 houses as known as John's Park houses. And are you not going to tell me that one of them houses is not going to have a problem?
Of course.
Of course they are. You know, and I have to say this to you. There was a family lived up around the corner from me. A Whelan family, same name as myself. And there was a big family in a minute. And my eldest daughter and their daughter went to school together and what have you, the whole lot. But blah blah, as years went on, they all grew up and went their own ways and what have you. But this house was up for sale. And my youngest daughter was married, and she said to me, would I think about buying that house? And I said, go up and have a look, see what you think, blah blah. So she did, and she ended up buying it. And I met the girl that went to school with my daughter, and she said to me, I don't believe this. I said, what do you mean? Well, she says, my name is Whelan. Your name is Whelan. Your daughter's name is Whelan. And your daughter ends up buying the house, which was a Whelan house, and now there's a Whelan living in it again. So that's the way it was, you know. And it's ironic in one way that a Whelan lives in the Whelan, and we only lived around the corner from one another, like, you know.
It was meant to happen.
Well, probably so, like, you know. But yeah, it was good now, you know. As I said to you, like, I have them around me, and
yeah, it's amazing that you have all your family around.
Yeah.
That's a big game.
Well, they're all within, you might say, half an hour.
Yeah.
Some of them only 5 minutes. I mean, I have a wife, I have 6 kids, I have 15 grandkids, thanks be to God, and what can you say?
Yeah.
I'm living in John's Park and I'm happy.
Yeah. Happy man.
Yeah.
Jackie, thanks very much.
Not at all.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very
Thank you.
much.